Alrighty, so this is going to be devlog number 17 for the Ultimate Multiplayer FPS Template plugin. And as always with these, I start from the bottom and work my way up, starting from the current version's submission, or the active version that is currently up on the marketplace. So this update contains a lot of things, such as a rangefinder, being able to hold optics and you still use the inverse kinematics and all that, which set up a pretty good refactor to how the aiming code actually reads everything and works, which ultimately led to an interface, which honestly I think was for the better because this allowed me to expand it a lot more, and you can now do a lot more stuff with it just by inheriting the interface and returning the required information. So on top of that, a lot of miscellaneous stuff has been done, and by the end of this update, this will be what triggers version 4.0. So to begin, I ended up scrapping the gore idea and instead just switched it over to fully focusing on just holes. So previously I tried to set this up to where it applied gore and all that kind of stuff as well. I ended up ditching that. And like I said, it's still like the functionality is there to apply things like blood. However, this is set up now just for static meshes to make everything a lot easier. So the way this works is here we have the hole component actor, or well, not the actor, this is just a general actor. And all you have to do is apply or add the hole component to it. Over here, you'll see it takes in some material settings. So basically you just add a material setting, you set the max hole count that you want it to be for, and then the material index that you want it to be applied to. Now, as you can see, this is actually an array, so you can make this support several materials. So let's say this mesh here had 3 different materials to it. So we have element 1, which could be like the cardboard, element 0, which would be the cardboard, then element 1, which could be these 2 sticks on the side, then element 2, which would be the base. So what we would do is, let's say we only wanted holes on the cardboard, so that would be element 0, like this one's set up, and then holes on the base, which would be element 2. So we would change the material index to element 2, and that would then allow us to only add holes to the cardboard or the base. If the sticks got hit, nothing would happen there for it. So let me go ahead and clean that back up really quick, and I'll give you an example. So there I just shot the target a bunch, and as you can see, we now have holes in the target. And then the decals end up getting cleaned up afterwards. So the decals are unrelated. Those are specific to the actual physical material class that's been introduced quite a long time ago. But you can see now we have holes. And same thing again would work based upon the material index. So on top of that, we also have some other functionality to that class. So did impact hit hole. So basically, if we hit, or let's say we shoot a hole here in the A box, now shoot another hole there, those should all not actually create a hole. So as you can see, it is still one single hole. Now the way that this works is I have a function here, did impact hole, it takes in the hit result, and a tolerance. So basically the tolerance is how far off of the center do you want it to be. So if you hit the hole within 1 centimeter, then this would impact as true, and we would not add a hole. So otherwise, if this was, let's say you were 2 centimeters outside of the hole location, what it would do is return false, indicating that we have not hit a hole, and we would add another hole. So that's kind of how this system works. And then obviously we have the function add hole, which simply adds a hole. All right, now moving on, expose some miscellaneous functions for Blueprint. So basically getting all attached firearm parts as actors instead of their part components. That's just something that's kind of more of a helper than anything. And I actually started working on a hobby project just to kind of see where things could improve, which is which is the reason a couple things are actually added to this list. Well, such as this, for example. So moving the high and low port triggering to public. So that basically allows external sources to make us go from high and low port, or to high and to low port. So not just us manually triggering it. Then I went ahead and updated the Blueprint example character because it was a little bit behind the C++ one, even though they are identical for the most part. I moved the firearm grip socket from the character component actually to the firearm. So the reason for this was just for the sake of people using marketplace assets, along with other thing. So this allows you to take your firearm here and alter the firearm grip socket so you can make it attach to different sockets. So you could have this M4 attached to CC_firearm grip. Then let's say we opened up an AK and we wanted it to have, attached to a different socket. Well, we could just have a S_my other socket, and if that socket exists on your mesh, it will get attached to it. Now again, this is all handled like the attaching is set up in a custom way behind the scenes, so you don't have to worry about it. So if you have a split first person and third person mesh, so they're different meshes, it takes care of all that for you, so it attaches to the correct mesh for yourself and for other remote clients and all that. More work on the whole component, so as you can see, I simplified it up and set it up to actually be a component, as I just illustrated, and moving on to the next day. So here is where I started working on the actual site and just giving a little bit more functionality to it to really improve some things. So some stuff that I didn't like was, let me go ahead and add a Magnified Optic. So here, as you can see, let me actually slide it forward. You can see we have some scope shadow. Oops, don't need to go a little bit farther forwards. Here you can see we're getting some shadow like that around the edges. And the problem that I was having, or that I wasn't too fond of, was for the sake of, I didn't like that different firearms may have different mounting points for certain optics. Now this was for two things. So one, it might cause issues with scope shadow. So, let's say the mounting point was really far up and you wanted to attach this optic to it. Well, you would have some problems. So the way I resolved this was, let me head over to the optic itself. This guy right here. Here we have some other options. Right here. So one, we have camera distance. So this is basically kind of like the default of how far you want your camera to be, either farther away or closer to the optic. So currently it's at 0. And if I bump this up to something like 10, we can see the result happen. So here you can see how close I am to this, which is normal, and it's at 0. And then when I add this magnified optic, as you can see, it gets pushed a lot farther away out in front of us. So what I can do is I can revert that back. And then if I go to a negative value like -10, the opposite happens, so it would be a lot closer. Next up, we have the use fixed camera distance. I need to get rid of the D. And when this is enabled, we're at a fixed point behind the optic. So here with this one, which does not have it, you can see I'm at a distance. I slide the optic forwards, and the optic is farther away. Now if I change that and use the magnified optic, and then aim, here's the distance I am away from it. And if I drag it forwards all the way, and I aim again, you can see I'm the exact same distance away from it, which fixes that scope shadow issue that I was concerned about before. So this allows you to fix it with certain things. So you may want to have this for certain magnified optics and all of that. It's just kind of a helper there. Let me go ahead and revert that back and move on to the next addition. So this is here for stocks. So basically this is for altering your length of pull, which is currently already, it's been a feature for quite some time. So here you can see how close I am to the optic. If I slide my stock back, you can see it's a good bit out in front. So it moved it a good bit farther away. Now, what this allowed us to do was have kind of a default. So let's see, that would be under the M4. Here it is. That would allow us to kind of alter the default distance that it is away from, well, that would push you away from the optic. So for example, let's say you have an underfolding AK, and you have two variations. So they're the same firearm, just they have a different, I guess, variation of the stock. This is just purely hypothetical, for example. But basically, the way that this would work is, let's say you have one, and this would be like your default. So we're at 0. So that means whenever we aim, we are this far away. So as you can see here, oops, just at the bottom, you can see, only thing we can really see is the castle nut. And then let's bump this to 5. So this stock now has a default length of pull of +5. So now when I aim, you can see we're a good bit farther away, and we can actually see the stock itself. So if I go then to -10, we're going to have a -10 value. So this is going to be a lot shorter of a stock, and you can see we're much closer to the optic. So that's how that influences everything in corresponding to that system. So you just kind of alter it there, and you can alter the length of the pull of the firearm that way. And this also still works with the manual adjustment, like I showed you before, of sliding the stock along the buffer tube, or whatever in your case you might be using. Right, so yeah, right here, adjustable stocks will still be a thing. Moving on to the next thing, added a function that you are going to want to call. So this was specific to a someone else who had requested this. They're using some kind of inventory system. I don't remember which one it was. I think it was like Jig, if that's right. And basically, he was trying to make the system work with it. And one of the problems that he ended up having was, even though he would unequip the firearm, which I have a function here, let me go ahead and pull it up. All right, so never mind, I forgot I actually replaced it with this entirely. But basically, anytime you want to unequip your firearm that is in your hand, and you are not replacing it with another firearm, what you're going to want to do is call on unequip current firearm. Now this will basically clear out any aiming actor, and which I'll explain later what I mean by that, and disable your ability to interact with said firearm. It basically clears out your current firearm. So we fixed basically what I found with that was it caused an area where we would crash, so that has also been resolved as a side effect to it. So next up, here is the introduction of the Big Refactor, which was intended, or let me rephrase that, which was the result of trying to make a rangefinder that worked with the current aiming system. So everything's related to IK for aiming with the rangefinder. Now the reason for that wanting to be added is you can thank Tarkov for that, because I saw in the 12.12 patch they added a rangefinder, and I thought that would be a nice effect to add. The only problem was when I went to go initially add it and set it up, I found that the current system wasn't really suitable for it. So with the new system, using an interface that allows you to more easily set up and be able to technically pick up any option or any actor that you have, that you just have to add the interface to and make it return the information that it requires. So basically this allows for now for things such as picking up magnified scopes and aiming with them without a firearm. So here I give an example such as a rangefinder, and this all uses IK, and specifically thanking Tarkov. So then we ended up replicating that system and fixing some bugs in relation to actually the magnified optics themselves. So I'll go ahead and cover this fix really quick. Well, basically all of these fixes really quick. And what they are is, so here I have two firearms. So this one, and I switch, and I got this guy, my bolt gun. So they both have magnified optics that are using render targets. So the problem I had was whenever I would switch between them, they would basically kind of screw one another, and one would not always be disabled. So now when you switch, it disables the render target that is on your back. So here, I'll go ahead and aim with this guy and switch to my other firearm. And as you can see, when I go back and look through the optic, it is currently disabled. So we're not wasting any resources or anything like that for something that's not in use. And same thing when I switch back, this is now disabled as well. So you can see right through the clear glass tube. So that was a problem, and that ended up getting resolved as a result. And another thing was, this is kind of more or less specific to weapon switching. That's not, it kind of fixes an issue. So basically, let's say you're aiming and then you want to change firearms. So this fix allows us to easily switch, and if you're using render targets, it allows it to still stay active or switch to the new active one like this. So basically you don't have to worry about it. So I can zoom all the way in on this guy, then switch, and this guy's out, zoom back in, and they all keep their state and all that kind of stuff. So that's what this section here is for. And then I'll go ahead and talk really quickly about the head rotation, because that's related to both of these, just basically the entire aiming system. So the new head rotation is dependent on the actual firearm or the aiming device. So to sum it up, we have this system here with two clients. And when I aim, you can see on the left-hand side, my head leans into it. So basically I can tweak how much this happens. So if I open the firearm, here I have the head aim rotation, which is 45. If I set it to 0, then we get no head rotation. So as you can see, now my head doesn't lean at all. So I'll revert that back to 45. And this also works for the other topic I want to cover, which is the new, well, the whole reason for the refactor. So if we pull out the rangefinder, so how you can see when I aim, I'm actually rotating my head the opposite direction because I have that value set to something different. So if I open the rangefinder, I have the head rotation set to -5. So I'll actually revert that back to 0 because that makes a little bit more sense. But basically, we now have, I'll go ahead and show you the whole aiming setup. So this is functional, and I'll show you it with the held optic as well. Let me just bring up my character really quick, and we can easily switch. That would be right here wherever I press 3 on held optic, and this is going to be our held optic. Here I have an example using, basically I'm holding the scope that I showed you earlier. You still have full functionality over it. You have all the controls that you had before. And same thing, you still have, rotation lag and all that kind of stuff, just with a crappy animation, but everything still works the same. So this is kind of modeled after the DayZ kind of system that they had. I don't know if it's still even there, but basically you could pick up and hold magnified optics in your hands and use them to look through and all that. I wanted the same system here. And because of that, that allowed me to easily make things like a rangefinder. So here I have my rangefinder, and if I middle mouse click, we have all of the ranges that we can get. So this wall right here is 11.8 meters away. This door frame, 11.6. This target, 17.5. And this wall is 17.9. And 18 right in this area here. So basically that's how everything allows it to work. So you can aim with any device that you technically want. You just got to set it up. So I've already set that up pretty easily for you. So basically by default, any class that is derived from FPS_site magnified has this ability by default. It's already in there. So as you can see, this rangefinder class here is derived from another class called FPS template rangefinder. And this one simply is derived from that magnified base class I just referred to. So you can see here we have all the same settings. You can do everything in the exact same manner. The only difference is you have some more functionality to it. So as you can see here, we have some functions such as measure. So that's what I'm calling when I hit my middle mouse button to read the range, and that's how that works. You also have some extra settings. So here we have the max distance that we want the rangefinder to function at, and then the minimum distance. So this works between a range of 8 and 999 meters. So currently the unit type is set to metric, and if I change it to imperial, this now works between 8 and 999 yards. So here I have it set to imperial, and as you can see, we are currently at 19.1 yards, and this wall is at 19.6 yards. And you can even see we got a Y instead of an M at the very end. If I change this back to metric, we then go to metric. So this wall is now at 18 meters. So that's how it reads it out. Then we have the ability to append the unit type. So if I turn that off, what you will see is just the range. We don't see meters or yards or anything like that. So if you have your own HUD or whatever you want to call it here, your own reticle system, whatever, like you can see here with the battery at the bottom, the crosshair, and the HCD at the top left. As you can probably tell, this is modeled after the Vortex Ranger. You can have that ability to do so. So you can just add it in yourself and tweak it how you need. Because currently the way this works is I'm interacting with a text render that is positioned right here, and then I get that text render on the basically at runtime once we get it and all that kind of stuff, and then we modify it as needed. So then we have another option for use upper. So if I uncheck this, basically the only difference is we now have a lowercase m instead of an uppercase m. So that's how that system functions there. All right, moving on up. We added an option, or I added an option to invert the rotation lag of the firearm. So this is for basically some people to kind of have a different style of gameplay with it. I'm not a huge fan of this setup, but I'll basically kind of give you a quick rundown of how it all works, or how it looks. So here you can see under the animation blueprint, we have an option, invert rotation lag. So this is the lag currently. So as I aim and I look left and right, the weapon lags behind. So if I look left, the firearm points to the right. If I look right, the firearm points to the left. Same thing with up and down. So when I look up, the firearm points down. Look down, the firearm points up. When we invert it, obviously, as you can tell by the name, it literally just inverts it. So when I aim now and I look left, the firearm points left. When I look right, it points right, and all that. It's basically the opposite. When I look up, it looks up. Look down, it looks down. So that's what that option is there for. Then we added some functions to control the amount of sway. So basically, this allows us to have things like holding breath, or if you're sprinting and then you stop and you want to aim, what you can do is you can increase the amount of sway to better suit that, say, like to indicate that you're tired and you're fatigued and you want to have more sway. Let me go ahead and add this right here. So I have a basic setup. So when you press 4, you have a simple flip-flop. So the first time you press it, you're going to reduce the aim sway to just something like 0.6. And then when you press it again, you're going to reset it to its default value. So let me go ahead and put on a Magnified Optic so you can see a little bit better. And I'll aim at this guy here. So here's my A zone. And I'm not moving my mouse at all. And then when I press 4, as you can see, it has steadied drastically. So here I'll point it right at the A, press it again, and it goes back to the default sway that it's at. Then I press it again, and as you can see, it steadies itself. And this allows you to be steady enough you can kind of almost see. Let me actually set this to 0, so we have 0 sway. It allows you to kind of, well, it allows me anyways, to kind of show off the zeroing ability. Oops. Let's see, did I somehow break something? I wonder if that ended up breaking something. That's kind of interesting. Let me try playing again. There we go. So I'm not sure what caused that. But I'll stop the sway entirely. As you can see, it's completely stationary. I press page up. So actually, I'll shoot really quick. So I hit right at the A zone. Let me go ahead and spam page up. So I'm all the way down at the B. And then when I shoot the A again, I'll go to the right of it. It hits up back at the A zone. So then what I can do is I can spam page down to go back to my previous projectile impact. And now I should be directly zeroed where I need to hit. So if I point at this A, I should hit directly on it. Like so. So that all works just like it does in real life. Let me change that back to, I'll just do 0.5. So we now have the ability to modify the sway basically on the fly. So let me disconnect that and come down to the next one. So I added a function to also aim or aid in the leaning. So it works in the exact same manner. So as you can see here, I give an example. So it allows for things like slow leaning, like Tarkov has. So you can kind of adjust how far you lean out and change the amount that you have when you're crouched or standing. So if you're standing, you can lean more. And if you're crouched, you can lean less and all that kind of stuff. You basically have free reign to do whatever you please. So I'll bind this to the 4 key as well. Go ahead and show you. So here's my default. And then when I press 4, I go to 90 and break my back. Then when I press 4 again, I go right back to default. And same thing with the other side. So basically it works all in the same manner. And again, this is all replicated. So I'll give you an example of that really quick. Here I'm leaning. There's my default. I press 4. I now have the new amount. I press 4 again. And I'm back to the default. So that's how that system there works as well. Moving on down, I did some optimizations here. So this was just kind of more of an optional one, but basically I created my own structure here to allow for a more lightweight way of sending or performing RPCs of your last of your projectile or muzzle location. So basically where you would want to spawn the projectile from. So let me head over to the blueprint example really quick that I have right here. And when I fire, as you can see, I call this function get muzzle projectile socket transform. This is kind of the default one. And it no longer returns an F transform. Instead, it returns the custom structure. And same thing, all the RPCs receive that custom structure. Now the reason for this is when comparing it to a normal F transform, the new structure is 3.4 times smaller. So you're sending 3.4 times less data each time you send it through an RPC. So this also has functions here. So what I can do is I can drag off of that custom structure, search for create. We can create transform for projectile. So basically it takes in this structure and returns an F transform from it. So that's used for things like here, I have it in this function. I take that custom struct, I call create transform for projectile and use that to spawn the projectile. There's also functions, or another function dedicated to it. Let me head over to the static library. It is under right here. So create projectile transform. And this does the opposite. So it takes in a transform and returns the custom structure. So you can kind of go back and forth between them however you see fit or wherever you need to. So I move the zooming function to an interface. So now both the firearms and optics can kind of like zoom in and out. They just have their own implementations of it. So the way that this call is actually called now is a little bit different. So let me go to the zooming in right here. So as you can see, instead of calling get firearm like we normally do, we call get aiming actor. And this will return either the firearm if we have one that's active, or the held actor, such as the range finder. And then basically we call, as you can see, on the aim interface, zoom optic, and we pass in true or false based upon if we want to zoom in or out. So then we have a new function for the interface. This is basically just a couple helpers here. So this has all been moved to the interface. So like get magnification sensitivity, get current magnification, and all that kind of stuff, just to kind of help me along in implementing some other things. Set up functions for replicating the left hand IK for the left hand to follow the right hand. So this is basically how it works currently. Let me go ahead and reattach the, let's see, it's right here. So I'll disconnect this. So here's kind of the basics of how it works currently. Nope, I do not want to spawn a firearm. Let me disable that really quick. Right there. All right. So let me go ahead and add it. And as you can see, my left hand is currently following the hand that has the magnifier in it. And that's a bit of a problem. So it kind of breaks everything. You can even see it in the first person view. So what we have here now is, let me disconnect this guy, use left hand IK, and we're disabling it. So this replicates and actually disables the left hand IK. Before this wasn't actually replicated, but now you can see it is, the left hand is no longer down there at the bottom. It holds it properly. So when I aim, we're good to go. However, as you can see, there's still a problem as the left hand moves with the right hand. So as the right hand moves left, the left hand moves left. So that's where another function came in, set left hand follow IK. So we're going to call that, and we're going to disable that as well. So now we're going to do the exact same thing. The only difference is when I aim now, the left hand stays completely stationary. Now I just realized I forgot to set up the animation really quick for the third person view, so let me fix that really quick. All right, there we go. We now have the correct animation actually playing. So the only difference is I got to change how far out it goes for the first person view. So that'll be something to add in to be tweaked as well. But now everything there is good to go. I just want to go ahead and do that before I forgot. Okay, then that is all that stuff here. And finally on what happened today. So I finished modeling and texturing the example rangefinder. Then I finally added the basic logic and added options to use either metric or imperial like I showed at the beginning. So that's all kind of the basic logic for the rangefinders, again, that I showed off earlier. So ranging and zooming in and all that kind of stuff. Basically all that stuff's still the same. By default, this only has a fixed 6 power, so it shouldn't have any ranging. I just have it there for testing, for the sake of testing. But anyways, that pretty much wraps up the update. It's fairly content packed. It's just got a lot of rewrites or refactoring and improvements going on to allow for more expansion for, well, the things that I just showed you. Anyways, that is going to be all for this video. If you're interested in this plugin, you can find it in the link down below in the description, as well as if you want to support me, you can find a link to my Patreon in the description below as well. And if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to join the Discord that is also linked down below, and I'll try to help you out. So, I'll see you in the next one.